Hello, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live program as we explore supply chain best practices brought to you by my friends at the Antares Vision Group, real experts in supply chain and supply chain technology. Hello, everyone. Once again, I'm your host, Bill Wall, and I've worked in the enterprise software and data space for more than 20 years, and I'm ever fascinated by the intersection of technology and business. No matter what industry you work in, supply chain management is critical. And technology advances we will discuss today are now extending visibility deeper and deeper into the supply chain and how it acts with partners in terms of collaboration and potentially third-party vendors as well. And I've been fortunate to cover the latest in technology deployed to address these critical issues out at the edge and into the core ERP solutions. Continues to amaze me how best practices in supply chain can be addressed across industries. Today's conversation is also an interactive one. It's a LinkedIn Live, so I encourage you in the audience to participate. Use today's platform to do a couple of things. Enter your name, title, and where you're located so we get a sense of who's joining. And you can use that same comments area right on your screen to post any questions you'd like me to ask our expert today throughout the program, and we'll try to address them during the course of our time together. My most productive conversations on supply chain have been with my friends at Axis, now part of the Antares Vision Group. So it's my pleasure to welcome a regular guest of mine. I feel like we're partners now, John, the Chief Strategy Officer, John DiPaolo. John, good to have you with us again today.
It's good to be here, Bill.
So today, I want to talk about what's lurking in the supply chain. That sounds sort of intense, but it's really about discovering hidden value and opportunities that might get to a better return on investment. What do we mean when we talk about what's lurking or undiscovered in your supply chain?
Yeah, I think lurking it's an interesting word, big word out there, but things that can undo your, kind of your supply chain, right? So the question we get a lot when we talk with our customers is a simple one that has a very complex answer. Where's my stuff, right? Yeah. So I ordered something, someone's manufacturing something for me. I have a relationship with a contract manufacturer or a supplier. They claim to have shipped something, yet I haven't received it, or I didn't receive, it in time, or the quantities that I was looking for, or a whole series of things, kind of that can break down, during either the manufacturing or the transport, and we're getting better and better with information around where things are and how trucks move and things of that nature. But I'm not so sure that we're getting better around the contents of that or the status of that. And, things that are lurking in your supply chain or they're going to upset your manufacturing or your distribution process. We're putting a lot of focus on solving those types of issues.
From our many conversations, John, that my first assignment when I went to work for SAP back in 1999, now I'm dating myself, was to look at supply chain from a communications perspective. And even back then, that question of where is my stuff was on the forefront. Now, supply chain management has advanced tremendously over the course of the last 25 years. But now we're really talking about the extended supply chain. So let's start with the definition. What do we mean when we talk about extended supply chain?
Yeah, and I think it's, do you have visibility and do you have control of third parties that impact the processing of your supply chain, right? So how do I manage, first off, how do I manage my suppliers of product, as an example? How do I manage companies that are doing third-party work on my behalf, right? Either subcontracting work or doing manufacturing or assembly work. And then downstream in the other direction, how can I obtain visibility of things that I've shipped out to my customers, right? So that's kind of the first layer that we talk about. And then beyond that, how do you get to secondary suppliers and understanding for critical items, kind of what the status of those are, even out beyond your primary suppliers. But there's a lot of value to be gained by solving just that first level of visibility between, kind of your immediate partners and yourself.
So visibility's always been at the forefront of supply chain. In the early days, it's where's my inventory? Where is it in my factory? And we talked about edge sensors and RFID to do that. Then we started to talk about visibility in the supply chain and sensors and RFID and tracking and labeling on shipping containers moved out. What's the state of visibility today? If people are really aiming for the very best, I assume it's end to end, as deep into the supply chain as you can get.
Yeah, and I think the state of visibility does vary a little bit by what industry we're talking about, right? So as an example, in the automotive industry, they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on this just-in-time inventory concept. Being able to see down to primary suppliers and having make-to-order deliveries just at the point in time when a piece of equipment was being manufactured, an automobile was being manufactured. So if we look at that industry as a leader in the space, right, of visibility, definitely upstream into the supplier area, there's a lot of other industries where they don't have that level of granularity and that level of visibility. And even in that industry, I think that there are improvements to be made so that you can tighten up that loop around being able to understand not only where things are, but are they being delivered in the right quantities at the right time to the right place with the right markings on them so that I can get some significant benefit out of that.
You talked about automotive visibility in the supply chain, particularly for industries where there are multiple manufacturers contributing raw materials. Chemicals comes to mind. What are the industries where this topic really is important?
Yeah, I think chemical is a big one. Discrete manufacturing, is a big one. Food, interestingly enough, is also a big one. And the other thing to think about, kind of in all of those areas, is there are drivers, governmental mandates, different business areas that are being driven, for visibility, where if you combine the ability to look upstream or downstream in your supply chain, and then combine that with what's required of you as a business, to fulfill, a food safety, requirement, or a drug sterilization requirement, or any of those types of things, you can really start to coalesce those around how do I achieve visibility for my business benefit while complying with these other mandates at the same time.
I was reading an article earlier this morning about the supply chain in the aircraft manufacturing space. Anyone who's listening to us today knows the planes they're flying on are highly complex machines. 600, 700 suppliers across hundreds of thousands of individual parts are in that makeup. So this has a lot to do with supplier management, does it not?
It does. It does. And what I'm seeing in the state of that area, kind of the state of the industry, you still have significant amounts of manual processing going on in order to manage all of that, churn of, I sent you a purchase order or I did a release, and are you going to be able to fulfill that, and when is it coming, and back and forth, and then manual processing back in ERP systems, in order to keep everything updated. And a large part of people's day that are in that space is consumed with what I would consider to be important yet low value, or tasks, right, around manually updating things, and kind of having to follow up via phone and email and other vehicles, and it doesn't allow them to really look at what they're purchasing and how they're managing that from a strategic perspective. It's just a lot of record keeping and a lot of manual processing to get there.
So it's no surprise, John, that the business process of supply chain management and the business process of supply management are discretely unique software tasks. And most of the ERP systems that we would talk about on this program have supplier management portfolios, discrete pieces of software. Are they set up? Are those types of supplier management platforms set up to be helpful to supply chain, or does the functionality not industry specific enough or not supply chain specific enough to help?
I think it's a little of both. I think when you look at generic platforms, that are quote unquote either supplier management or order management, they do a job, they serve a purpose, but What we're really talking about is personalized solutions that are tailored to a specific business process. And it's more than just getting the demand out to the suppliers, right? Because a lot of that is focused on that, right? So getting demand out to suppliers, but what we want to look at, and what I think is truly valuable to industry, is something that automates digitally the delivery of, and let's just use purchase orders as an example,
Right.
Delivery of purchase orders to a supplier. The ability for them to confirm not only that they received it, but also confirm delivery dates, confirm quantities, confirm any other piece of information that's important to that order, potentially be able to request changes to that, or scheduling changes, or other things based upon their capability to fulfill. But then we have the whole execution side of what happens when I'm done, right? What happens when I've shipped that order, or I'm preparing to ship that order? The tactical side of, can I mark the product in a way that's beneficial to my customer, right? So compliance labeling initiatives, things like that. Can I create an advanced ship notice for that particular shipment, and have that automatically create an inbound delivery or a notification on the ERP side that this product is coming? The other thing which I think becomes very interesting, and this is where we really think about things, is the absence of action, right? So if I haven't confirmed it, if I haven't printed, if I haven't done an ASN creation, well, that means that there's a strong potential that that shipment is going to be late, or non-existent, or incomplete. So how do you tailor a system that not only allows you to very efficiently manage those different tasks, but also can proactively look at what should be happening and let you know when those tasks are not happening?
When I talk to other technologists in the space, what I often hear about these kinds of supplier systems is they're pretty complex to learn and not easily configurable. I know you folks at Axis spend a lot of time on ease of configuration and trying to reduce the training load. Is the concept of getting a new supplier, a new vendor on board, is that onboarding process where the technology often sets itself apart from its peers, that ease of onboarding becomes a really important topic?
It does, and I think if you look at the history of our company, going all the way back to its inception, the user experience and simplifying the user experience has always been a key part of our DNA, right? So we think about what are the tasks that are absolutely necessary, and how can we simplify that, and how can we make it so that it walks you through the process, right? So the benefit of that is really twofold. We all know that kind of in today's labor market, people change jobs, and there's adjustments and things like that. So the ability to learn something very quickly and not have to go through a rigorous training exercise in order to be able to participate, is extremely important. And we consider that to be a core tenet of any system that you put out. The other thing in today's world, with an ever-changing supplier landscape and all of the complexities that come with that, is how quickly can you onboard a new supplier?
Right.
Can you do it very quickly and bring them on digitally into your supply chain? And then if you need to, how quickly can you swap them out, right? And the other thing that we think about, which I think is important, is you may want to try out a new supplier or a new group of suppliers, and you don't want to go through the entire process of a full B2B electronic hookup process that has to happen there. This solution, because of the way that we can rapidly onboard suppliers, allows you to bring on new suppliers, or in the case of food, as an example, where you have a great deal of seasonality, how do you ramp those up and down based upon what your load is, without having to have an army of people doing that?
So I want to press on some of the topics here. We always, when we talk about technology, try not to get involved in geopolitics. But you alluded to the ever-changing business world that we're operating in today, and it strikes me as we do this LinkedIn Live just over the last 10 days, three or four of the world's leading manufacturing and trading countries have wildly thrown back and forth potential tariffs. And so it strikes me that someone that is doing business across country boundaries might have to make the kinds of changes you're describing, find new suppliers, change suppliers, upset the apple cart of my supply chain management approach in rapid fashion. So the technology solutions got to make it possible to make those changes when the world around us is so dynamic.
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we actually had a call on Monday or Tuesday of this week with a company, that was dealing in product that could be sourced from multiple places, and one of those places was going to be hit, with the tariff, and they quickly were scrambling to try and figure out the best way to diversify their supply chain in case that actually kind of stuck or went through. And you can apply that to anything, right? So it doesn't always need to be political. You can apply it to weather events, or you can apply it to other things that are going to impact your
Ship
supply
stuck in the Suez Canal that sort of shuts down global shipping, west to east or east to west. It would be another example of that, right?
Correct.
But and those are in large part sort of near-term crisis kind of situations. Regulatory changes, though, that impact, as you mentioned earlier, labeling or documentation in many industries, pharma, food, you've mentioned a couple, I'm sure chemical because of hazardous materials shipments. Those are all components of supply chain management that have been around a while. Where we are today, though, is really about being able to do that beyond your own loading dock and facility, but out to your suppliers and their suppliers, right?
Correct. And then the other dimension, to not only just the supplier side, and when it comes to things like compliance and compliance labeling and, information that you need to share downstream, is we also are more and more in this diversified manufacturing arena, right? Where you have contract manufacturers that are working on your behalf. And from a supply chain optimization perspective, what you don't want to have them do is have to ship everything that they manufacture on your behalf back to one of your facilities to be potentially repackaged or ultimately sent out to customers. So what we're seeing are more and more kind of multi-step supply chain processes where I may provide raw materials to a group of subcontractors. They package it, they finish it. They then need to label that. They then need to have all of the documentation required in order to ship that on out to end customers in a dynamic customer environment, right? So to try and do that, via the old phone, fax, and email approach is not really going to work, and it never has worked, right? It's always been fraught with issues, and this connected digital way of sharing information in a way that is quick, is in a way that people can get on board with very quickly, and also has all of this tactical capability to it, has a significant amount of benefit.
We talk a lot about examples. We can't always talk about companies by name, but if you think about some of the conversations you've had with companies, what are some of the challenges you've seen people facing recently, and where you've seen examples of people who have done this right and have thought this through?
Right. And two come to mind immediately. Both customers that we're working with now on the supplier management side of the house. The first one, large electronic manufacturer, dealing with a large number of suppliers, for everything from OEM parts to boards to chips to, kind of all the pieces that make that up. And they were doing it in a very traditional way, through their ERP system, having buyers manually going through and adjusting dates and adjusting quantities and those types of things. And they really sat back and said, is this what I want our team to be doing? Right. So they're undergoing a transformation with us to digitally integrate with all of their suppliers in order to be able to manage that process electronically. And they see a significant benefit in time savings and operational efficiency just for their buyers being able to manage more suppliers per buyer in a quicker amount of time with better accuracy. So that's one. The other example, which is interesting, is we have a customer that we're working with who is using one of the large platforms, for supplier management. And they found it to be very cumbersome to work with, and also found it to be very expensive. And when they took a look at the cost benefit analysis of what they were doing, they've made the decision that it's time to go to a more nimble approach to providing this service in a more tactical way. So personalized solution built for their business that's going to allow them to interact with their suppliers the way that they want, and get off of the large kind of generic purchasing, buying, supplier management platform, and have that information that we're providing integrated directly through their ERP system. So that one it's an interesting driver, in the fact that they're looking for a more personalized solution that will work better for, and it's a large supplier base, 3,500 suppliers that we're talking about, and looking for rapid adoption as well.
The concept, though, that you think about is a common technology platform that is more easily customized to a customer's requirement as opposed to bespoke systems.
Correct. Yes. We're talking about a centralized platform. Under the covers looks the same for everybody. And that's been a hallmark of our solutions forever, is because the workflow component of how do I want somebody to interact with the system is completely separate from the integration and management of the solution. So it's very easy for us to personalize without impacting the core, in order to make it the most efficient as possible for a particular implementation.
Purchasing platforms, in my experience, like the ones we're talking about, have often had sort of two jobs. They are handling supplier management, but they're also delivering a lot of information into back-end financial systems because they involve buying and payments. Do the kinds of systems that you're talking about on the supply chain side, they do the work for supply chain management, but are they also equipped to feed finance systems and understand the financial components of the purchasing, receiving, and shipping of goods and services? They have to bridge both sides of that equation, right?
They do, and so kind of when you think of the inverse of buying something, it's paying for something, right? And invoice processing and ensuring that you're matching and what you ordered was what was delivered. This goes a long way in not only speeding that process up, but eliminating, kind of all the manual processes that go on in order to actually take a look at, is this the right invoice to be paid at this particular point in time for these goods that I have received? So definitely it covers that side as well.
If we roll the clock back then, John, to sort of where we started 15, 20 minutes ago, which was really about visibility down the supply chain, any finance-oriented person listening to this broadcast would say, listen, for me to make the decision to make payments, I need visibility to know the product has shipped and has arrived and has been received and is in the correct condition that will trigger that payment. So there's just as many signals in the supply chain that matter to, say, finance or accounts payable as it does for supply chain leaders. That's when it's done right, all of those boxes can be checked, right?
Correct. And the automation, and the way to bring that information together, and provide that from a accounting perspective, that takes a lot of time today, and people spend a lot of time doing that. And it's not always done correctly, right? So we've seen many examples of overpayments or good enough processing in order to go ahead and do that, and then reconciling that, on cycle counting or on physical inventory or those types of things. And then you wonder, well, why don't we have those products here? And you can look all the way back to the shipping process and receiving process to understand where the holes were.
Quite interesting. Many of the questions I've been asking you today, John, have come in from our viewers. One that often gets asked on these programs is, does this matter for companies that are not the big manufacturers who, to your example, hundreds of suppliers, even small and small, mid-sized businesses in these spaces have the same challenges. The number of suppliers, the quantities dealt with, the number of shipments may be on a smaller scale, but the discipline of and the visibility needs in supply chain transcend all the way down to smaller companies.
100%. And what we see kind of on that side of the fence, you may not have the dedicated resources that the big companies have in order to do this, right? So then it becomes even more challenging to keep up with it, right? So it is a process that is ready for automation. It's a process that's ready for the application of AI in order to help people, facilitate what it is that they're doing. And we're looking at all of those angles, as we bring, this solution to bear. And what you find is that people now can focus on what their job is rather than, trying to keep up with what somebody else's job is, right? At a supplier or at a third-party manufacturer. And, you can really also start to spot where the problems are, who's good, who's challenging. People can get a feeling for that, but this also provides them with a level of data and granularity that they've never had before.
So as we wrap up, John, I got to go to the last question that I always seem to ask you because it's the most important. Really, when you look at this issue and it's such a multi-layered challenge, it can look very complicated. We learned the lessons way back in the 1990s about big bang implementations and trying to do it all at one time. How do people, when they start to think about extended supply chain visibility, where do they start? How do they begin to peel back the layers of this onion? And how do they launch a project? What do they need? What's a best practices approach to that?
Yeah, and I think that like most of the conversations that we've had, picking a meaningful initial implementation is key, right? It's very easy to cherry pick a couple of suppliers that work well and do this with them and declare victory. But what I like to look at with our customers is, okay, let's look at a cross section of suppliers that you have from large to small, that you do business with on a regular basis or on a semi annual basis or kind of everything in between. And then let's look at the business processes on the ERP system that would be effective, right? And then you roll that out and I'm purpose saying the word pilot. It's an initial implementation that's going to test out your thesis that this will work. And then once you do that, what you get out of that is a set of best practices for training your suppliers, best practices for onboarding them. You see a number of different scenarios from an integration perspective back into ERP. And then once you do that, then it's just how do I roll it out for those categories of suppliers or third-party manufacturers across the rest of my supply chain. And you also have the benefit of bringing their story to the others and say, well, this is why you should do it.
The work of managing supply chain never ends, and these conversations continue. Of course, the best lesson you've taught us, John, through many of these programs is you got to start with a great partner and who has the expertise. So thank you, as always, John, for your sage advice and for being a guest again. Great to chat with you.
As you as well, Bill, and I look forward to the next one.
Our thanks to John DiPaolo, Chief Strategy Officer at the Antares Vision Group. You've known him from Axis, which is now part of Antares. If you'd like to reach out to John or the great team at Antares, please use their LinkedIn accounts. It's a great way to get to know their thinking and vision in this space and to follow them and the topics that John and his peers talk about. More information about the Diamind family of supply chain solutions can be found on the Axis website. My thanks to the great team at Antares Vision Group for bringing us today's program. And for that team and for John, I'm your host, Bill Wall. Please join us in the conversation online. Let's keep the discussion going. Share the recording of this program with your peers, which will be posted on LinkedIn. And until next time, good day.